Hi everyone, welcome to my channel JS2 Big Data. In this tutorial, we will learn about reading and writing data from pandas to SQL databases. So we will use two types of SQL servers here. One is SQLite, which is an in-memory database, and we will also see how to deal with MySQL database from pandas. So let's get started. Let's say I already have a data in a file called weather2012.SQLite. So if you know, SQLite writes the data into a simple flat files. So we can use that from pandas. So to read data from SQLite, the first thing that we will do is we will use SQLite 3 libraries. So let me import that, and I'll use SQLite 3.connect. And because it is a flat file, so I'm just specifying the directory where this file is present. Okay, and using this connection object, I'll use the important function called pd.readSQL. Okay, so you can also read about this readSQL from pandas documentation. You can see what it basically does. Okay, so basically this would read the data from your table and then write it to a data frame. Okay, so that's what I am doing. So I am just picking up the top 3. You can actually pick the top 30 as well, so not a problem. Okay, and then we are just printing the data frame. So let's see, right? So I have picked up the top 30 rows and I am just printing it. Okay, so again, if you have to read the data from SQLite, it's very simple. You can use SQLite.connect, specify the directory where the data is present, and after that you would use this connection object in the pd.readSQL method. So you will specify the schema. So in my case, the data is in weather 2012, and then you specify the connection object here. So it's simple. So one important thing to note here is that the data frame that you fetched just now, it has auto-generated IDs, right? Because we have not mentioned in this code here which column to use as the primary key or the index of my data frame. So obviously, you know, I would use ID column as the index of my data frame. So that's what I'm going to do. I'll do pd.readSQL. I'll specify the query here. Maybe I want to fetch the top 30, so that's okay. And then I'll specify the connection object here, and I'll say index column equal to ID. So my ID column in the table weather 2012 would become the index over here in my data frame. So let's run it and see. Yeah, exactly. So you can see that it has considered ID as the index for my data frame. Okay, just another example. If you want to have like combined index, like two columns considered as index, so you can do that. You can specify the index column, and you can specify in an iterable what are the different columns from your table would be considered as the index in the data frame. So let's run and see. Yes, exactly. So ID and date time is considered as the combined index for this data frame. Okay, so here we have seen how you can read data from SQLite server. Okay, so I will share this notebook on GitHub link, so please do check out and please try out the examples. Next is how you can write to a SQLite database, right? So what we have seen is how you can read it. Now we will see how we can write it to the database. So what I will do is I'll read the data frame first, and I'm defining as weather df, and then I'm creating a connection object here. Okay, and after that what I'm going to do is I'll do connection.execute. I'm just dropping if that table is already existing, so I'm just going to drop that. And the way to create is you will use the data frame dot toSQL method. So to read it, you will use read SQL, and to write it, you will use toSQL method. Okay, it's simple. You'll use .toSQL method, and you will specify the table where you write it and the connection object. So it's simple, right? So you would create the connection object. This is an additional step I'm doing so that we don't get any error while I'm trying out the examples. Ideally you would not have this when you are doing it for the first time. And then I'm just writing it where the data frame to table and the table name and the connection object. Okay, so let's run this. Okay, and there are some warning that you can read about it. Okay, so what it basically says is that if you have column names with spaces, those would be converted to underscores. So if you have a column like person name, person space name, it would be converted to person underscore name. That was happening before Pandas 0.14 version, but now it would be preserved as it is, so they are not going to touch it. Okay, so let's move on. So we created this database, and I'm just going to read it back and then display the data, right? So let's do that. Yes, so it has read the data. Okay, so you can see that this has read the data very nicely. And how did you create this? Because you created it here. Okay, and okay, and then this is another example where you can also use order by and different other functions which are available in SQL, and you can perform various operations in here. So that's it. So that's all as part of SQLite is concerned. So next thing that we will move on is how you can deal with MySQL. Okay, so to deal with MySQL, we will use two different libraries. One is SQL Alchemy, another one is PyMySQL. So I want you to remember this syntax a bit. So if you see here, what I'm doing is I'm creating a table name. I am creating the data frame. So you know this very well. So diamond dataset, I think you are familiar with. So if you remember the previous tutorials where I talked about group by and aggregate functions, that is where I used this diamonds dataset, right, which had auto-generated key, auto-generated index, then the caret, cut, clarity, and the price of the diamonds. So that's what we are going to use it. So what we will do is, here is the table name, then I'm just creating a data frame from the data, and I'm creating SQL engine. So basically create an engine to connect, and I'm specifying the URL here, and I am also specifying the great username and great password, and then the URL where I want to connect to, and these are the connection pool cycles. Okay, and I'll use that SQL engine to create a DB connection out of it. So I'll use that engine.connect to create the DB connection object. Okay, so I'll just repeat it again. So first thing you would do is you would create a SQL engine using the create engine functions from SQL Alchemy here. Step 1, you would specify the URL, and pool cycles, it's optional. And then I'll create a DB connection object from SQL engine.connect, and after that what I will do is I'll use the data frame .toSQL, right? Earlier also you have seen that when we want to write it, we will use toSQL method, right, here. And same thing we are doing here. We'll use toSQL. We'll specify the table name where we are going to store it, and database connection object here. And if the table already existing, then fail the operation. Okay. And similarly, if you want to read it, instead of toSQL, what we will use is read SQL, right? So we'll use read SQL. We'll specify the query and the connection object, because the data frame will come on the left side of it. Okay, so I think this is pretty straightforward, right? So let me try it out. Now before trying this out, I want to also tell you that I have created a Docker Compose file for running my MySQL database. So I'm just going to run that. Okay, so from my terminal I will go to this directory. Okay, So I am in the required directory now. What I'll do is run docker compose up-d so that my MySQL database is up and running. And to check, I'll use docker ps. So ignore the other container. So you can see that MySQL is up and running at port 3306. Okay. So I will go back to the code. So what I'll do is I'll run the writing part first. So I'm just going to execute this. Okay. So when I try to run it, what it says is unknown database pandas test, right? So that's because there is no database called pandas test database. So what I will do is, here if you see, there is an admin app that is also running with MySQL. So I have shared this docker compose file with you, so please do make use of that. What I'm going to do is visit localhost colon 8080, that's the admin app URL, and the password is root, username is also root. I'm going to log in and I will create a database here. Okay, I'll click on this create database. The database name here is pandas test, so I will assign here pandas test and save it. Okay, so you just have to do this additional step to create the database. Okay, now I will run this code again, right? So it's always important that you read the exceptions, what it says and why something fails. As a programmer, that's very important. So I have run it, and if you really see that it says table is created. So we have created our data, right? The database table. The next is to read it and see whether we really created it with proper data or not. So I think we missed out the password here. Let me read the exception, what it says, right? So I think it won't be able to establish the connection, right? It's not able to establish the connection because there is no password there. Fine. So let's run it again, and this time there is some more exception. The pandas test dot diamonds doesn't exist, it says. So we are going to visit our admin panel here. So I'm just going to reload, and if you see, actually the table name it created is pandas test dot diamond. That's not what we wanted. We wanted actually the table name just diamonds. Okay, so I'm just going to delete this. Okay, I'm just going to drop it from here. So my table is dropped. I'll go back here, and I'm just going to name it as diamonds. Okay, so let me create it. Fine. So diamonds got created, right? So next thing what I'm going to do is I'll put the database here as it is. So I will put that, and from here I'll say select all from diamonds. Okay, let's run it, and now you see very nicely the data is coming up. Okay, now obviously there are some more things needs to be done, right? But this is fine for now, and instead of print I'll just say display, because that would be a little bit better. So you can see that I have got index, caret, cut, clarity and price, right? And ideally you would declare this index itself as the index of the data frame, not this one. So to do that, I can set df dot set index and so on, right? And then you can specify the column name here. That would be index, and after that I will display df. Okay, so let's do that. Maybe you need to override it, yes. Okay, or you could just say in place, equal to true, so that's fine. So now index has come here, caret, cut, clarity and price. Okay, So that's pretty much about it, how you can read and write data to different databases. So I have taken two examples, right? One with SQLite and other one is with MySQL database, and I have shown you how you can easily read and write data. So in fact you can use lot of other complex libraries, perform different operations on SQL directly. So when you have huge data in the database, in fact you can directly deal with it from pandas. There are different ways to deal with it, so you can read about it on the pandas documentations. And most importantly, I also want to highlight the credit for two resources that I referred while preparing this material, and it's basically picked up from these two resources, so I also want to give credit to them. So thank you for tuning in, and I will see you in next amazing video. So till then, please stay tuned, and thank you so much. So if you like the content that I create, please do like and subscribe my channel. Thank you so much.